Hey folks, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. I am really excited to be presenting this content for you, and I'm hoping that you're going to get a huge amount of value out of it and that you get to use it and apply it in your business. Certainly there's a focus right now, I'm wanting to get this stuff to you so that it helps you more effectively lead the way through the strange times in which we find ourselves. But beyond that as well, I want to share this with you so that when this time passes, because we all know that it will, when this time passes and when the economy rebounds and we start to do the turnaround, I want you to be in a better position to be able to capitalize on that as well. So, one of the things that I said in my original invitation was that I'm going to share with you a whole bunch of leadership material that I developed back in early 2000s and then spent the next 13 years teaching quite a few thousand managers and team leaders and supervisors and executives and business owners. And one of the things that I said within that, and something that's very important to understand about this material, is that it's actually contextualized for us here in Australia, right? The vast majority of leadership material that exists in the world today is actually North American in origin. And please don't misinterpret what I'm saying here. I'm not anti-American by any stretch of the imagination. However, we down here in Australia do think and act just a little bit differently to our American cousins. The American leadership model is predicated on two core underpinnings. Number one, visionary evangelism. Okay, that whole, I have a dream, I see a future, the my fellow Americans kind of thing. Visionary evangelism is one of the core underpinnings of the American leadership model, and it's born of the very beginnings of the American nation in terms of white settlement. It's where entrepreneurialism really kind of had its ground and its seed, and that sense of aspiration that comes with it. You get all visionary and evangelistic to an Australian workforce, and you're going to get a whole bunch of really strange gestures made in your general direction, and people kind of looking at each other and saying, "What the hell is she on?" Right? The second piece of the American leadership model is around positional or assumed authority. Okay, Americans are very respectful of the people in positions of authority. Right, so the bigger the title, the more letters after the name, the more prestigious the institute that person got it from, the more powerful they are. Right? I'm a senior vice president of the known universe. I have an MBA from Harvard. All hail to the chief. In this country, the bigger your title, the more letters after your name, and the fancier the place you got it from, the bigger the wanker you are. Now, whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. I'm not sharing an opinion here. I'm simply sharing with you the view that in the Australian workplace, we're not interested in visionary evangelism, and we sure as hell couldn't care less what your title is or how important you think you are. And yet that's really what most of the American leadership material is embedded in. So what I'm going to share with you today, I'm actually not going to go to the E3 models just yet. Right, the stuff that I kind of previewed the other day. What I want to do is spend a little bit of time sharing with you a presentation which is all around the Australian cultural norms. Right, and with the Aussie cultural norms, what I'm actually talking about here is actually the findings of a bunch of research that were conducted by Dr. John Evans of Cultural Imprint, a business in Melbourne, some number of years ago now. And so things may well have changed just a little bit, but what's interesting is, this time we find ourselves in right now, I am seeing bucket loads of evidence of the Australian cultural norm live and large, particularly on social. So Aussies have a tendency to categorise their boss in one of three ways: either a top leader, an okay boss, or a complete bastard or bitch. Right, that's in very simplistic terms how we tend to kind of view the people to whom we're meant to look up, right? And as soon as I say that, you're immediately thinking of somebody that you've seen on TV just recently who you've got a lot of disdain for, particularly right at the moment, rightfully or wrongfully. Okay, so what I'm going to share with you is a bunch of results that came out of an extensive study that was conducted by John Evans. It covered 30,000 employees. At the time, they were employees of Telstra, Energy Australia, Shell Australia, and there's one more that's gone right out of my head right now, right? But there were 30,000 people who were surveyed with an intent of understanding what is the Australian cultural norm in the workplace, and with the backdrop of why is it that certain initiatives that have gone incredibly well overseas for some reason meet resistance here in Australia and sometimes even die on the vine. So, as I share this stuff with you, chances are many of you will say, yeah, of course, you really needed to survey 30,000 people for that. Intuitively, I think it will probably resonate for most. But the cool thing here is it is now actually empirical data. It's evidence that was gathered. It was research that was conducted. So here we go. First thing, when it comes to us Aussies, right, in the workplace, dropped out of there, come back up. We are a naturally cynical bunch. Okay. Our inclination here in Australia is to, when we hear a pronouncement, when we hear a piece of news, when we hear somebody in a leadership position making some kind of announcement, our automatic disposition is to not trust it. Okay, we absolutely believe that those people for whom we're meant to follow, those people in leadership positions, we have an automatic disposition to believing that they have a hidden agenda. Right? And yes, there are going to be some exceptions. There are some people, who aren't like that. But what the research found out of 30,000 people was the vast majority of employees in Australia were mistrusting, right? And that their natural disposition is to pick fault, is to look at the negativity, and unlike, say, our American cousins who will have a, yeah, let's just do it kind of attitude, our attitude is more along the lines of, that won't work, mate. Yeah, that won't work, mate. We tried that before, it didn't work before, won't work now. We're particularly like that when it comes to ideas that don't come from here. Right. And when I say don't come from here, I don't just mean it came from Japan or it came from France or it came from America or it came from Italy. I'm talking about up here in Brisbane, and it didn't come from Brisbane, it came from Sydney. Right? So, we're a cynical bunch, and we have a disposition to looking at why something won't work long before we start to look at reasons why it will or it might. Right, and so we're naturally inclined towards, in de Bono speak, to being black hat wearers. So here's the next piece that goes with that. Okay, and obviously this slide is just a tad old, but two larger than life figures, and what the research showed us was that we're actually mistrusting of people in positions of authority. Right? And that actually stretches all the way back to the beginnings of white settlement. The mythology is they dragged us down here kicking and screaming with balls and chains around our ankles, and they have been a pack of pricks to us ever since. That's the mythology. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter, but that's the stories that are told, if you like. And as time has gone by and as our history has kind of evolved, we have continued to tell stories around the kitchen table about those dickheads. Yeah? Some of those things were, stories about the stupid decisions that were made by our British commanders during World War I and World War II. If you think about the one day that we truly celebrate being Australian here in Australia, what day is that? What's that I hear? Australia Day? Nah. Not a chance. That's just another bloody day off, mate. The day when we truly get our Australian on, and this year's going to be incredibly different in terms of how we do this, is Anzac Day, right? That's the day when we are truly at our most proud. And if I can say somewhat tongue-in-cheek here, It's the day that we got our asses kicked by a bunch of Turks because of a stupid decision made by a POM. Right now, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I'm trying to give you the sense of the hardwiring, the DNA, the train of thought that exists in us. We've got dark humour here in Australia, and the day that we truly celebrate is a day that's kind of loaded with mistrust for people in positions of authority. Now, when I say people in positions of authority, I'm also talking about self-proclaimed subject matter experts. Like some wanker who puts on a presentation about leadership or about how Aussies are. What the hell would he know? Who's this bloke? Where's he getting this shit from? Right? So I know right now a number of you are watching this and you're questioning the validity of what I'm sharing, or you're saying, oh yeah, that might have been true, back in your day, but that's not true now, etc., etc. I get that. I understand that, right? So we're a cynical bunch. We're mistrusting of people in positions of authority. And right now, you and I, and because, this slide, we're thinking about those people in that position of authority. But folks, right here, right now, if you're a manager, if you're an executive, if you're a business owner, right now, some of your people are also questioning, what are you doing? Where are you going? What's your thinking? Who are you focusing on? Things of that nature. Put the first two together and you get the third one, right? We're absolutely just waiting to be set up. We're waiting to be tripped up. When that new idea that you roll out, when that fanciful new thing that you're buying into, when that new initiative that you're wanting us to implement, or that new system you're wanting us to use fails, who's going to pay the price for that? Who's going to get the blame? Is it going to be you, boss? Oh, hell no. It's going to be us, right? We're just waiting to be set up. Now, if I give you an example of that, a number of years ago, I was working with an organisation, and I'll loosely describe them as being in oil manufacturing, so making different oil products. It was an organisation that had a history of paying profit share to its people, and it would do that, once a year. It would pay them bonuses. Those bonuses were nice and equally distributed across the workforce. It was a really, really good little reward and incentive and a reason to be working there. As the 2008 GFC started to grab a hold, interestingly, what the organisation decided to do in order to help its employees was to in fact pay that profit share 6 monthly. So instead of $1 at the end of the financial year, they decided to break it into $2 so that their employees and their families could actually have an injection of cash halfway through the year rather than having to wait to the end of the year. A beautiful gesture which was met with absolute cynicism. Absolute cynicism. What are they really up to? What are they doing that for? Is that so they can pay us less? And so on it goes, right? So we're a deeply cynical bunch. We're mistrustful of people in positions of authority, and we're just waiting to be set up, right? And that's kind of compounded by the fact that we like to think, us Aussies, that we have this inbuilt bullshit meter. We like to think that we can spot a fake. We know when somebody's being disingenuous. We know when they're really driving their own agenda. We know when they're doing sneaky shit behind our backs, etc., etc., etc. And again, it doesn't really matter whether it's true or not, but it is a belief that we have, right? And so we tend to be on the lookout. We're looking for fake. We're looking for our boss or our leader or our manager to be taking care of him or herself as a primary objective. And all this stuff that they're talking to us about that's supposedly going to be good for us. Yeah, really? So, your employees now especially are, kind of questioning, how genuine are you? How authentic are you being right now? What's your real agenda? Are you genuinely interested in us? Are you actually having an intention of taking care of us? All right. So the inbuilt bullshit meter. We tend to have a tendency in this country to vote with our feet, not with our voice, right? So if I think that this idea that you just come up with, boss, is a stupid idea, am I likely to voice that opinion? No, not really, right? And probably one of the best examples that I can give to you for that, and this is evolving to some degree these days, but we're still not as good as other cultures are at doing this. If you go into a restaurant or a coffee shop and you get ordinary or even less than ordinary service, are you inclined to go to the owner, the manager, and say, I thought I'd give you some feedback for an opportunity for you to improve? No, we don't, not in Australia, right? What we do is we swipe the card with a degree of anger, we give them a cold look, and then we walk out the door, and allegedly we go and tell 11 other people how shit the service was, or how crap the food was, or how rude and abrupt the staff were. So we don't tend to give them the opportunity to improve, we just stop going there, right? And we are getting kind of better at that. We do now have an expectation of service, and so some of us will voice that, that discomfort, that dislike. But when it comes to work, what we're consistently seeing still is that we will not actually tell the truth to those that we follow. Some of you may be familiar with some study, some research that was done by two folks, Bernthal and Wellens. It ended up in a paper which became known as the War for Talent. And in the War for Talent, one of the pieces that stood out for me and was really fascinating was that when a bunch of people who had voluntarily left their last employer, and in the Bernthal and Wellens research, we're talking tens of thousands of people around the world in 26 countries, were asked, so they hadn't been fired, they hadn't been retrenched, they had resigned. And when they were asked why, for 78% of the respondents, the reason why was because of a disconnect with their immediate supervisor, right? So we tend to vote with our feet. We will leave. We will walk away from an organisation rather than, have the confrontation and have the conversation with our boss, telling them that we're not enjoying their leadership style, or we think they're a poor manager, or something as simple as, no, that idea is never going to work. That's dumb, right? So we tend to vote with our feet rather than with our voice. Okay, so from here, let me spend a little time in North America for a moment. And again, please don't misinterpret what I'm saying here. But let's go to North America just for one moment and take a look at the norm there. And this is a sweeping generalization that I'm going to make here, and I do admit that. But when we tend to look at most Americans, what we see is what I describe as a goal-seeking missile, right? Americans are hell-bent, man, on being successful. They'll do whatever it takes. They're all of the kind of stereotypes that we tend to grab about the American way of doing things. The American culture is absolutely obsessed with succeeding, right? And again, you can kind of understand that in terms of the sociology of certainly white America, or America in terms of from white settlement. That was all about people escaping a place of persecution and going to a new land and forging a new life and having life, liberty, freedom, all those sorts of things. And so right from the very beginning, America was always going to be about success, right? So as a general kind of way of thinking, Americans are obsessed with succeeding. In Australia, as it turns out, we're actually obsessed with not failing. Yeah, right? Now, again, don't misinterpret that. We're not obsessed with failing, we're obsessed with not failing. And we are, certainly by most measures, a truly incredibly successful nation, right? We rank highly in the Entrepreneurial Nations Index. We have, certainly up until recent time, enjoyed amazing GDP per capita. We've been the one country in the planet that has managed to avoid recession for an incredibly long period of time. So we're not a bunch of losers, we're not a bunch of failures, but we are a bunch of people who are absolutely obsessed with not failing. And so the route that we will take to a point of success is almost kind of diametrically opposed to the route that our American cousins might take. right? And so when we start talking to our employees about this thing called BHAGs, right? You've all heard that big, hairy, audacious goal. That term BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, is actually in the terminology of the Harvard MBA program, right? It's something that American leaders are enthused to set. Well, in Australia, that actually turns our people off, right? And the reason why is because of some of the previous slides. We're cynical, we're mistrusting of people in positions of authority, we're just waiting to be set up and knowing that we're going to have to pay the price for it, right? And so when our bosses set these big, hairy, audacious goals, what we believe is we're being sent on a hiding to nothing, right? And so what I want to do as an employee is make sure that when this crumbles, when this fails, because you dickheads can never plan anything properly. You know, we all know those Aussie phrases. You know, couldn't organise a bloody conga line at a children's birthday party. Couldn't organise a root in a brothel. All those sorts of pieces of phraseology, you know, they're deeply embedded, deeply grounded in our sociology. Right? So when all of that thinking is going on and you're setting up a big, hairy, audacious goal, which is something you probably need to be setting right now if we're going to get through these times we find ourselves in, understand that for your people, they're going to be obsessed with not failing. And they're probably a little less concerned with whether that failure means this idea fails, right? But they're certainly obsessed with whether it's going to make them fail as an individual, right? So just be mindful of that. This one, I think most of you'll get kind of straight away, right? It's part of the Aussie way. You know, it's a piece of terminology which is deeply embedded in our lexicon, and that is tall poppy syndrome. We are actually a nation of collectivists. Again, somewhat tongue-in-cheek here, but had communism survived, it actually probably could have done quite well here, right? We like to band together, right? Particularly in times of crisis, and that's good news for right here, right now, right? We come together like almost no other nation on earth. There have been studies made of how Australians react in a time of crisis, and it would appear that we are one of the stronger nations on the planet for coming together. You know, you look at our response around things like the bushfires, then floods, or earthquakes, or a bomb going off in Bali, or, you know, the great toilet roll shortage in Woolworths that is there at the moment, and then the subsequent response in the community, particularly for our elders, you know, our elderly, the frail, the disenfranchised. It's, you know, it's beautiful to see, you know, the people who are quarantined at home for 14 days and the amazing effort that's going on to kind of support these people and to back them up. So in a time of crisis, our collectivism absolutely serves us. But with it comes tall poppy syndrome, right? A small example of that, and there'll be a bit less of this happening at the moment, but one of the things that I've routinely seen when I've been at airports and you get into a taxi, where does your average Aussie male sit when he gets into a taxi, right? He sits in the front passenger seat. He sits in the front passenger seat next to the driver, right? And that's primarily, and sometimes even subconsciously we don't realise it, but that's primarily because the only people that sit in the back are wankers who are up themselves and women, right? That's the thinking, right? Again, I'm not making any kind of social statement here about my own values or beliefs, but that's the thinking. I sit in the front because, you know, I don't reckon I'm any better than you are, mate. And the people who do sit in the back apparently kind of are up themselves if they're fellas, if they're males, right? And so we don't want to project that. We like to believe that we're homogenous, that we're all one in it together kind of community and society. You know, and we don't like this notion that there are haves and have-nots here in Australia. So, you know, a bunch of stuff there for you to be thinking about. What was really interesting with the survey results was that of the 30,000 people that were surveyed, around about 28% of them were second-generation Australians. So they were the children of, migrants that had arrived in the country some years before. Those 28%, their responses were very, very much more like the long-term, if you like, white Anglo-Saxon respondents, right? So one of the things that's really interesting in the Aussie culture, right, and that doesn't stand for fly in, fly out. It stands for fit in or F off, right, on your bike. There is a deep, dark, insidious kind of side to our culture. This image is designed to kind of depict that from the perspective that what you find with the Aussie culture is that it grows around you like lantana. You wake up one day and you are absolutely and utterly covered in the stuff, and it's hard to cut your way out of, right? In Australia, you either fit in or you can F off. And there are so many living, breathing, and unfortunate examples of that still, today. For me, probably one of the greatest kind of examples of this was the Cronulla riots many, many years ago, but it continues to be perpetuated. And I don't want to get into a big political conversation about that. But the reason I'm sharing this with you is because as much as we like to think that we're a multicultural society, that we've become this amazing melting pot, and that as a consequence we've evolved, we haven't. We make them become like us. You better assimilate or on your bike, right? And more importantly, because I'm getting on a bit of a soapbox here, but more importantly, what this means is, for those of you who have employees who aren't the classic white Anglo Aussie, I absolutely guarantee you that if they are second or third generation Greek or Italian or Vietnamese or Russian or whatever it might be, they will be very much thinking along the lines of all the previous slides, right? The responses in that 30,000 person survey, where 28% of them at the time were second generation Australians, their responses were more like the long-term Aussie rather than people who were here from their culture of origin. All right, so all well and good. Hopefully some of this is resonating for you. Some of it may be gelling and you're kind of saying, yeah, okay, I agree, maybe not wholeheartedly, but I agree in general with what you're presenting, James. So bloody what? Where do I go from here? And particularly in this day and age, particularly given that the reason you're doing this workshop, James, is to help us get through this crisis that we're finding ourselves in. So let's talk about that. Yeah. First of all, understand this. Your employees right now are looking at you, and they are evaluating you. They are questioning your leadership. And that's true because we are all questioning the leadership of our nation's leaders and our state's leaders. There is a day-by-day critique going on. Whether they like it or not, they are being subjected to their 360-degree performance appraisal, right? So are you right now. Ideally, the rating that you're accorded is a fantastic leader who I would willingly follow to the ends of the earth, as opposed to this guy's opinion, right? So what does that mean? Where do we go from here? What are some ideas that I can share with you around responding to the Aussie cultural norm? In the next few workshops and over the next 3 weeks, I will get very, very practical, and I will share with you what became known as the E3 model, the E3 culture of leadership model. But for now, I'm going to share a few things with you that respond to these Aussie cultural norms. All right. First and foremost, understand this. The one thing that every single one of your employees wants to know right now, when you're asking them to do or not do something, and for those of you who've got kids, you know this, it's the question, why? 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 Right? Why do you want us to do that? Why can't we do this? Why can't we go there? Why do we have to do that? Why? Why is imperatively important to answer, particularly right now. And a lot of you, I'm sure, will be very familiar with Simon Sinek's work, where he says start with why. This is a different kind of why, right? His why is about purpose. this why is around, help me understand right here, right now, why I need to do that. Why is that important? Why should we go down that road? Why should we do this thing? Why can't we spend that money? Why? Your employees here in Australia, first and foremost, want to know why. Yeah? Why are we doing that? Secondly, more than anything, your people want to know that you know that they are human, that they have not only aspirations, but right now that they have fears. Right, there's been a fair bit of talk about Prime Minister Morrison and his emotional unavailability, his seeming lack of connection to us as human beings, and to understand that, the bushfire thing, as he forced people to shake hands with him, was a palpable example of that misunderstanding. Our people are scared right now. Our people are nervous. Our people have anxiety. I'll share with you, I've had moments of anxiety in the last few weeks, right? We're all human. Not only are we creatures of aspiration, but we are also creatures of fear. Right now, that one thing that we have that distinguishes us from almost every other living creature on the planet, an imagination, right? That's something that's quite unique to us as a species. Our imaginations are running riot with the stuff that scares us. Lots of us are playing big kind of 3D surround sound horror movies in the cinemas in our minds, and we're scared shitless about what could be. Where could this go? What could this mean for me and my family, right? We need to resonate with that. We need to understand that, now more than ever, you need to be, being as human as you possibly can, resonating with the humanity of your people. I'll go into more depth around the practicalities of that when we get into the E3 culture of leadership stuff in the next workshops. Here's the really, really important, and it's doubly important right now. It's going to be kind of hard to pull off. I know that you need to stretch me, boss. I know that's kind of that's part of the management mantra. Anybody who's in management has been taught you've got to raise the high bar. Right, we're constantly stretching our people, asking them to grow. The key thing in this country, though, is don't let me absolutely catastrophically fail. Right? Do not let me fail. Let me have lessons, let me have learnings. Don't step in and do everything for me. And if I go kind of beyond the situation we find ourselves in today, in terms of my growth and in terms of my professional development, by all means, stretch me. And don't necessarily keep stepping in with your underpants on the outside, being super person and doing stuff for me. But please don't ever let me truly fail beyond redemption, beyond salvation. Don't let me do that, because the moment you do that, you are dirt, right? And the people around the person who has failed will also see you as dirt, right? We'll talk more about that as well in the other one. Interestingly, because we don't like, because of the collectivism thing, because of the tall poppy thing, we actually don't like being given public praise, right? I specialise in recruiting sales professionals for small business owners. And most people tend to think that the sales folks are the most egotistical and the ones who need their ego stroking the most. They want their praise and all that kind of thing. The fact of the matter is, even salespeople in Australia don't really like to be singled out and have the spotlight put on them and praised in that way. Please don't make me stand out like dog's balls. If you're going to recognise me initially, just recognise me privately. Come up to me authentically, face to face, person to person, kneecap to kneecap, and say, hey, just wanted to say, well done on what you did there. That was I loved how you handled that situation. I loved that deal that you brought in. I loved how you responded to that customer. I love how you stepped in and helped one of your colleagues there. That was just amazing. Well done. And then, if that's something that you want to set up as an exemplar, if that person's behaving in a way that you would love the rest of the team to also behave like, ask the individual if it's okay if you then do some kind of public acknowledgement. But don't do the public acknowledgement as some kind of surprise. We hate that in Australia because you're setting me up to be a tall poppy. Yeah? You got to tell it like it is. This is really, really important right now. And I'm not going to go too detailed into this, but some of you will have seen a post that I put up on LinkedIn and Facebook recently around something called the Stockdale Paradox, right? So write that down, Google it, the Stockdale Paradox. It's part of the story of in Jim Collins' multi-million bestseller management book called Good to Great. Right now, we need to have the courage to confront the brutal facts of our reality, whilst never, ever, ever giving up hope that we will prevail in the end. Right? We can't afford to lose that. But at the same time, if all we're doing is talking positive, 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 if we're saying bullshit to ourselves like, we'll be right, we'll get through this, that kind of positivity sets off the bullshit meter, particularly right now. Right, so right now we have to have the courage as leaders, particularly in the Aussie context where the bullshit meter is live, to tell it like it is. We need to tell our people the truth, right? Now, some of you, I know it's going to be a horrible truth, because that horrible truth is we have to close our doors. You don't have a job anymore. And I truly feel for all of you that have to have that conversation or have to hear that conversation, right? But prior to that, tell your people the truth of what's going on, and you will be amazed, because again, this is the positive side of collectivism. This is where your people will rally around you, right? If we tell people the reality of our situation, here's what our bank account looks like, here's what our forward orders look like, all that kind of stuff. If you share that truthfully with your people, rather than thinking that you're protecting them by not telling them, you'll be amazed at the ideas that they'll come up with, the ways in which they will offer to serve you, to serve your customers, and to keep the doors open, right? You'll be amazed at that. So tell them the truth, tell it like it is. Don't set off their bullshit meter. Importantly, build me a bridge. And, I know that's become a somewhat unfortunate phrase that the politicians are using at the moment, but the truth of the matter is, and this presentation you can see is from 2018, the date is from early 2000s, so it's not a new phrase from my side of things, but I'm here. You want me over there. I know that I have to get over there. I know you can't do it for me, and it's not your job to do it for me, but for crying out loud, build me a bridge, right? Even if it's a rickety bridge like this, right? But help me get across the chasm, right? Don't just thump the table and demand it. Spend time with us. Let's talk it through. Let's plan. Let's organise. Maybe you're going to need to skill me up. Build me a bridge to help get across to the other side of that, please. Yeah? And I think this is the last slide. If memory serves me, use your power fairly. Right? Right now, I'm seeing fantastic examples where leaders, certainly in bigger organisations, executives in bigger organisations are saying, you know what, we're taking a massive pay cut. Some of them are cutting pay to zero. Some of them are taking 50% pay cuts. They know that they're in a position of power. It's very rare that the people at the top of the organisation are the ones who go. It's always the people at the bottom of the organisation in great swathes, and then a chunk of people in the middle of the organisation in great swathes. I have had to be the deliverer of that bad news on multiple occasions where we've had to let people go from the organisations that I've been with. Just make sure that you are using your power fairly. And what that really kind of extends to here in Australia, the one style of leadership that we absolutely gravitate towards, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this as I get into the culture of leadership presentations over the next few days, is a style called captain coach, right? We don't want some person off on the sidelines who wears a suit and a tie, who rants and raves and carries on and coaches from the distance. The person who we absolutely will follow to the ends of the earth is the person who is on the field with us. Yeah, that captain coach who's setting up the plays, who's taking the knocks with us. Right? You think about all of the sporting heroes that we admire in this country, and it's not hard to understand that that's who we look up to. All right, so right now, more than ever, we need to step up beyond being selfish bastards, beyond being an administrative boss, an incredibly expensive administrator, and becoming leaders. But you need to do that, folks, certainly in this country, with an understanding of the Aussie cultural norms. I hope this has been of some value to you. I really encourage you, keep coming back, please. I'm going to be putting a workshop up every day now for the next 21 days, where I'm going to share with you absolutely every single thing that I have ever known and taught thousands of people over the last 20 years around how to be an effective leader and to create a culture of leadership. We're in tough times. There's just no denying that, right? I want you to get through this, I truly do. And whatever I can do to help you and us to survive this and then thrive beyond it, I will do. Please pop any questions you have in below. I will attempt to get back to them whilst also, obviously running my business through this time. Cheers. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.